ADP has been shaping the world of work with innovation and expertise for more than 75 years. As a global leader in HR and payroll solutions, ADP continuously works to solve business challenges for our clients and their workers, from simple, easy-to-use tools for small businesses to fully integrated platforms for global enterprises, and everything in between. Always designing for people means we're focused on just that, people. We use our unmatched AI-driven insights and proven expertise to design innovative solutions that help people achieve greater success at work. More than 1.1 million clients across 140-plus countries rely on ADP's exceptional service to support their people and drive their business forward. HR, talent, time management, benefits, compliance, and payroll. Find out more at adp.com.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our next session, Balancing AI and Human Impact in Payroll. I'm Tom, Director at JGA Recruitment, and I'm joined by Tonya James, who is VP of Product at ADP.
Hi, Tom. I'm happy to be here.
So at JGA, we work closely with payroll and HR leaders across the globe, and one theme continues to come up time and time again. How can organizations do more with less without compromising accuracy, compliance, or employee experience? The reality is payroll teams are under increasing pressure, talent shortages are intensifying, and expectations from the business and employees are rising. At the same time, AI is rapidly moving forward from concept to capability. So today's conversation is about cutting through the noise and answering a critical question. How do we use AI to enhance payroll without losing the human expertise that make it work? I'm delighted to be joined by someone who is right at the center of this transformation. So, Tonya, let's start with the bigger picture. What are you seeing in the market right now when it comes to payroll transformation?
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting time, and we're seeing some interesting trends. So a little bit of background. As you mentioned, I'm with ADP. ADP is one of the world's largest providers of HCM, global payroll, global HR, global time. Specifically, I work in our global space where I work with companies that are managing multinational payroll, paying people around the world, over 140 countries. And so it's interesting because we're seeing so many trends that are in reaction to what's happening from a technical perspective with AI, as you mentioned, and I know we'll get much deeper into that, as well as with things like generational shifts and where is talent, where do we have more talent entering the workforce versus where do we have more retirements happening? So with all of this as background, one of the things that ADP does is we do an annual survey where we're talking to senior operational leaders with payroll responsibility in large corporations. So we just completed that for 2026. It's the potential of payroll survey for anyone who's interested in looking at it, looking it up. But it's been fascinating to see some of the trends and shifts that we're seeing coming out of this survey. One of the biggest ones that I see is actually the strategic value of payroll. So a big shift that we saw in the last year is that payroll is moving from being part of an organization, part of finance, part of HR, to a standalone organization within the same company. A year ago, it was the majority were part of finance. Now, the majority are standalone within a standalone payroll group, really,
Amazing.
I should say, reporting into the company, which begs the question, like, why? What is really happening here? And in digging deeper, both in the survey, but in conversations I have with payroll leaders, I see a few things. One of the things that's really happening, I think, is there is a recognition of strategic value of payroll. I mean, payroll touches every single employee in an organization. Payroll data is usually some of the best data within a company. If you think about it, employees are more likely to update their address for the right pay versus maybe something else, right? So
Sure.
it's really good data, and obviously data feeding into AI, into analytics is really important. So I think that's a big part of it. I think there's a recognition of how important it is to ensure payroll there's payroll continuity, ensuring that regardless of what's happening in the world, that people are always getting paid. And so I think all of those things are really elevating payroll. And with that, the role of the payroll team, they have an opportunity to maybe shift from back office to being more of a strategic business partner. So
Yeah.
think of how HR has kind of made that shift. I think payroll can do that because there's a lot of value that can come in the insights that payroll could have and that they can bring to the organization for strategic decision making. So it's been a
Absolutely.
really fascinating time. So we see that as a big trend. We see another big trend with payroll talent. I'd mentioned retirements in some parts of the world, new entries into the workforce. So payroll talent, having people coming into payroll, always looking for talent and talent shortages. That's been an interesting trend. And then, of course, how to adapt to new technology, and for the sake of what? So if I'm bringing in new technology into payroll, what should I expect? What should it deliver for payroll value, not just to the payroll team, but the rest of the organization? So those are kind of it's a lot of meaty trends, but those are the big things that I'm seeing.
There's a lot going on, right? So
hmm
obviously, something that we're quite close to is the difficulty on attracting payroll talent, keeping payroll talent, and we're seeing a clear increase in payroll staff shortages. I know you mentioned the same. Well, I find that really interesting, where we're trying to do more with less. We hear that administrative payroll roles are going to be replaced by technology, but then we're still experiencing shortages. So you're bringing in tech, trying to do more with less, but then somehow we still have a staff shortage, which I find really interesting. And I think something that I think on that is, as payroll is being seen as more strategic, do the other functions within a business think, actually, the payroll person could really help and come and do this role? And are they being headhunted for different positions in the business where they're more respected now?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely one of the things I'm seeing. I mean, it's interesting, again, as I talk to clients, prospects, companies, I am hearing of payroll talent that's being put into some pretty strategic roles in other parts of the organization, whether that's in finance or actually in tech. So that's interesting. I've seen where payroll talent has moved into tech as well. So I think that's definitely part of it. I think another part of it is again, some natural turnover that you're seeing as people who maybe started careers in payroll 30, 40 years ago are retiring. We always generally say at ADP, you usually don't see people that have gone to school for payroll like you do, finance or something like that. And so for people to enter payroll, the paths are always really interesting. They come from somewhere else. And so, I think a big part of this shortage is also looking at what are the skills that are needed, and then where can you recruit that talent, whether it's in new parts of the world, new geographies where there's maybe more people that are entering the workforce. Do you have the right tools and technology that actually attract younger talent versus, things that are more intuitive, maybe a little more designed for a digital native generation versus tools that are, maybe very old and dated? Do you have that? And really, what are the skills that you need to be able to bring into payroll as you think of how payroll changes?
Yeah.
Technology
Do
is
you,
kind of changing that up a bit.
for sure. Do you see, because I agree, people go to school for HR, people go to school for finance, but
Yeah.
they don't for payroll.
Yeah.
I don't know if I see the payroll qualifications being the way that people will come into it, but I see people that go to school for analytics, data, processing, that sort
Yes.
of being the new route into payroll, I think.
Yes, very much so. I think data is the biggest route into payroll because, of course, payroll's data heavy, and being able to have an understanding of data flows are part of that, right? Where's data coming from multiple systems to go into payroll? Where does it need to go from here? What makes good data? How are you managing your data quality? I think that's a big part of it. Analytics is also an interesting part of this as well. So back to the earlier point about trying to get more value from the data, the value of data by unlocking more analytics. So where you have maybe a an analytics background. That's coming into payroll a little bit more. I think it's moving away less from what's my checklist of things I need to do, but a little bit more around how do we ensure, we're running things operationally in a way that's really smooth. Again, we've got the right data quality, we're getting analytics out of it, even some of that business continuity planning. How are we making sure that we have an optimal payroll operation? I think that's really the kind of talent that's coming in now.
Yeah, for sure. So we see cost and productivity being major drivers. Are organizations still reacting to pressure, or is it more of a strategic shift now?
I believe it's a bit of both. And it's interesting because it's also a little bit related to that strategic value of payroll. So where a payroll is considered still a back office operation, I think there's always pressure that's going to come in with how do you take cost out of it. That being said, obviously, again, a lot of conversation around AI and the opportunity of AI to add more automation. So I think that's also driving some of that pressure. How can technology remove some of the work that allows for an organization to maybe run a little bit leaner or have more scalability? That's how I think about it a lot too. Organizations I talk to, many are saying, hey, my company's growing, but I have to support with the same amount of people. Or I need more flexibility of where I'm putting people. And so they need that kind of scalability. And so I think the tech side of it is also driving that expectation.
Absolutely. So last year payroll congress, it's literally coming up for a year because we're flying to Nashville in 2 weeks' time. So excited about that.
Yep.
But yeah, last year I listened to a talk. It was a global payroll and workforce leader, one of the largest payrolls in the US, and they were talking about how do you start to elevate payroll from back office to strategic / boardroom, and the example that she gave, that she had implemented some kind of AI and technology to track trends, to get good data, as you mentioned. What happened with that is they actually uncovered like a fraud episode and also an error rate within time tracking. And that ended up becoming a multi-year project and saved the business $300 million. And it's like, that's when you start to get the attention of C-suite, CFO, executive level. A dollar saved is as good as a dollar made, right? So that's a real life example of how we see that working. So that's an opportunity, right? You don't have to go and save $300 million, but where do you see the biggest opportunity in AI in payroll today?
There's several areas. So opportunity rich area, I would say. I'll start first on that value in the analytics and the visibility, because, as you said, I think there's a huge opportunity there. Other organizations that I've talked to, they're also doing things like using payroll data to be able to inform things like, where should we put new employees, right? What's our workforce strategy? Or uncover things like, hey, where do we have a lot of absences that are driving higher costs in different areas, right? So I think that's really valuable. But to get that, you have to have, first of all, you have to get the analytics, right? So you have to have data from all of your payrolls. And if you're in a model where that's very decentralized, that can actually be a lot of work. And we see that organizations that maybe don't have a layer of real global analytics or global reporting, they spend a lot of time actually just getting data and trying to normalize it to be able to even do reporting or analytics, right? So being able to actually pull together your data, have normalized data so that you can uncover those analytics is an opportunity. But I think even more on top of that is actually making it easier to get to the so what. So, with the AI, I think we all are used to our experiences asking ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini something. And really, there's a huge value and opportunity there in unlocking analytics in the same way. So rather than doing a whole bunch of things of what are my metrics and setting up my metrics and all kinds of stuff behind it, you just want to have the opportunity to go into an interface and ask the question, where are my payroll costs increasing? What's behind it? What are the drivers behind it? What's happening regionally that's different? And being able to uncover those analytics. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. Now, Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating once you start to break it down. Now, another big opportunity goes deeper into the operations itself. So, as you look at a payroll cycle, there's what I think of as maybe non-specialized work or really routine work. That's a big part of the payroll cycle. Has my data all come into the system? You know, are there variances that I need to be able to check out, you know, or data issues to be able to resolve? Are things flowing as they should flow? Data coming in, reports going out, those kinds of things. Those are all things that can be automated. And what's great with AI agents and automation with agents, like you get the automation and it can be smarter over time. So as an example, if you're using AI to help support things like data resolution and fixing errors, it can get a little bit smarter, right? It can say, hey, you know, we know this has never been an error. So while we can flag it, we can say, pay attention to something else. And it can be smarter over time. But all of that, those are tools that can help the payroll team really spend more time in kind of the specialized side. So AI is not great at context, at nuance, right? So it can flag things like, again, using data resolution as an example, it can flag things like, hey, here's some things you should pay attention to because this is a different pattern. It doesn't make sense in your data. But you want that specialized payroll person to say, oh, wait, yes, I need to pay attention to this. Or, you know, I'm bringing in context or nuance where I know that this is actually a change that's an okay change. And so your payroll team, the way I see this is AI can bring in more of that automation so that your payroll team can spend more time on less on routine tasks, a little bit more on the stuff that's the brain work, right? Making sure that what's delivered by the AI is accurate. You know, the data is resolved in the way that it should be, all of those kinds of things, so that the output is that on time, timely, accurate, compliant payroll. But they're really able to spend more time on kind of that specialized knowledge work because the rest of the work is automated for them. So that's how I see the opportunity and I see the evolution.
Which is where the true value is, right?
Yeah.
And I think so. You speak to a lot of different organizations, of course.
Mhm.
For organizations that are starting out, what are the first practical use cases that you see them adopt?
It's a great question because there's really a lot of conversations that I'm in with where do we start? And
Because
and
everybody
I
wants
think,
it, right?
yeah,
We
yeah.
want AI. We want AI. But it's like, what does that actually mean? And how do we start?
Yes, and I think it's more obvious in many other areas of the business, right? I see as you look at HCM generally, there's some other areas that are a little more obvious for AI. So many of the organizations I speak to are in exactly the same boat. Where do we start? What should we expect? What do we need to start looking at? One of the biggest places that I think is a good opportunity to start is actually around that data side, right? Being able to use AI for the sake of saying, do you have missing data? You know, let's review the data anomalies, data variances, and put it in the review cycle. I think that's a really good place to start because that can be a great tool again for the team. Now, what's been interesting that I've seen as I see organizations start to introduce this as part of their process is it takes a little bit of time to actually get trust in it as well, right? So if you have a payroll team who's doing a lot of, say, data variance checking or reconciliation using their own manual tools, it takes a little bit of time for them to have trust in AI in bringing up the important things that they need to review. But once they develop that, I think it's a matter of practice, and just kind of seeing the results. And once they develop that, then it can be a significant time savings for them. So I think it's a great place to start. But yeah, it's also a no risk place to start. You know,
Yeah.
it's a good place where, you know, it can add value, but it's the risk of things going wrong, I think, is a lot lower than maybe some other areas of the payroll process.
Yeah, for sure. So we've spoken a lot about the opportunities, and you've
Mhm.
brought us on nicely. Where does AI not fit within payroll? So where should organizations be cautious?
Yes. So at ADP, our approach is AI should always have the human in the loop. What that means is we think of it as maybe a coworker, a collaborator for the payroll team, which means, to the point you made, right, there's places where the human should be there in the loop and AI shouldn't be there. So my point of view is, as an example, where you need that human oversight to for the sake of checking and you want things to be accurate. So in calculations, like I think anyone I talk to, nobody wants a black box that's just trust me, AI did this calculation and it's correct. I was talking to a coworker recently, and he brought up a great point. I'll repeat here that I thought was just great. He said, nobody wants to see at the bottom of a pay slip a note that said, this was done by AI and there may be errors, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
right. Nobody wants that. You have to make sure that you have that oversight in your checking and your reconciliation, your audits, to make sure that you have that accuracy, that compliance. Another place that you don't want it, I think, is really in your downstream reporting. Again, AI can help bring up, here's what it looks like to ensure accuracy, but you want the human oversight to sign off on that, to do that double checking. Similarly, you don't want your government withholding with a disclaimer saying, hey, this was done by AI and it could be incorrect. You want that
Yeah.
all correct. And
It makes you
so,
want to go and look for the errors,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah, exactly. And, and in payroll, what's the acceptable amount of errors? Like, think of it individually. How many errors are you okay with on your paycheck, right? The answer is none. You don't want any. So that's where, again, that human oversight, I think, is really, really helpful and important. One other place I'll bring up is actually in the world of compliance. I touched on compliance a little bit earlier. You want that compliant payroll. AI is a great opportunity to help understand new regulation, right? What does new regulation actually mean? Even connect to where are the implications within your own organization. I think what you don't want to do is completely leave it up to AI to ensure that your payroll has been, any adjustments you need to make to ensure that it's compliant, say a change in a minimum wage, that actually is put into your system. Again, I think you want to make sure you have that human oversight, so you have that complete confidence in the accuracy.
yeah, absolutely. And what separates, so for you and the organizations you speak to, what separates those that are doing it successfully and those that struggle?
It's a fantastic question, because I think a lot of people are still sort of figuring it out. So those that do it really well, I would say, do a few things. They make the tools accessible for their payroll team, right? So they have them actually using AI. They have tools available for them. They, of course, that usually comes with guardrails, especially where you have sensitive data, and payroll data is absolutely sensitive data. But, they have brought in tools. They give them the opportunity to actually try things within their payroll process. Believe it or not, there's still some laggards out there. There are still organizations I talk to that, they haven't yet introduced anything in payroll. They don't have tools that their employees can use, even outside of the payroll process, to start to use AI in other parts of, other tasks that they have to do within their days. So the successful ones are introducing it broadly in their teams. They're trying things out. They're partnering with companies that are bringing, some of those features to them. They are, they're really pushing the boundaries of, saying, hey, I always have to do things this way. And again, pushing that, try the tools, make sure that you are using the tools and actually comparing that to your old processes to make a move to a new process. The last thing I'll say too is I think this actually relates a little bit to talent. So successful organizations are also looking at the talent who, and bringing in talent that, are maybe a little bit more, again, digital native, that are more used to more digital tools, looking for more of the digital tools, and more apt to do some experimentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we see a very similar thing. It's like we've gone from saying, okay, can they manually calculate a pay slip, to what have they done with AI in systems? Have they been through this transformation or change? And into what depth have they done that?
Yeah, and
How
I'll make
has
if you don't mind, I'll
Please.
make a quick point on that. It's been a really interesting shift in a year on that as well. So as I've talked to organizations, 2 years ago, it's like, we're hearing AI and there's some dabbling in my company. A year ago, it was still trying to figure out what's happening in payroll. This year, it's much more of my expectations are it's helping me in payroll, help me figure out how. So it's been a big change in a year.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it, as well, to either hire an expert to have internally with you or work with a partner that understands it, because there's red flags. It can go wrong, and I think it's super important to have your entourage around you if you're going to embark on this journey,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it can go wrong, right? So kind of leads us on. So next question is, how has payroll technology then evolved? So from like a traditional system to more intelligent AI enabled platforms. And what does easy to use now even mean now?
Yeah. Again, another fantastic question. So the evolution, it's been an interesting couple of years with AI and the evolution. I would say if you look back to payroll systems, a few years ago even, it was very, very heavy in the tasks that have to happen. I am bringing in data, I am checking data, those kinds of things. What has really shifted is, of course, the introduction first of AI with chat, right? Being able to ask questions along the way. But what I really see is happening, and where we're taking our products is much more of what I'd call kind of an intelligent platform. So going from AI as a companion kind of feature to deeply embedded within the actual platform itself, so that you're leveraging AI without having to maybe call it up separately. It's embedded into a process. So what does that mean? And this kind of goes to your point with the user experience, that it means things like, instead of saying, hey, I'm working on my, checking on compliance, or data resolution, that what happens is the system actually brings up, hey, I'm flagging for you proactively. Here's some things that you should look at, and I can help you resolve it. So that's where I think it's really evolving to be much more intelligence built into the platform with, by the way, audit tracking or visibility. That's also, I think, really important. So being able to say, how is the platform, the technology, embedding this, making it easier for the system to take on this kind of work, but giving me the control to know where I've used it, where I've opted in to always having the same tasks automated in the future, where I can make changes, where I can even get some data on why is the system suggesting this kind of resolution. So that's how I see it really evolving. It becomes a lot more personal then. It becomes a lot more proactive then. It's less about I am navigating to different places in the system to do things. It means the system, the user experience can bring it all together so that I can, as a user, maybe even type in, what do I want to do, and have the system kind of run it for me. So I can type in, I need to do my data checks. I can type in, I want to manage my user access, and then have the system kind of work through that for me. So I see a big shift for that for the practitioner. I see a shift for the employee as well when it comes to being able to use AI to understand things like my pay changes. Um, starts with asking questions, why has my pay changed? But I think it evolves to be, again, much more proactive and personal, being able to let them know, hey, the system has seen you have an upcoming change because maybe it's the new year and your withholding for your benefits has changed, or you have an upcoming leave of absence, those kinds of things. So again, more proactive, more personalized, because it's much more embedded into the system.
Nice. I think we see the payroll practitioner becoming more of like an orchestrator than a doer. So what do you think that looks like day to day?
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's where I think it's really, as an orchestrator, they're feeding in to, again, a system that's intelligent, that's managing all of this workflow. So is the data coming into the system? Or am I doing the checks that I need to do to make sure that I have the accuracy I need, or am I bringing my subject matter expertise into doing the kind of checks within the system? I'm not uploading data, right? I'm not doing, say, a spreadsheet check. because the system does that for me. But instead, I'm making sure, hey, yes, this new regulation has been applied, or all of my outputs have actually been delivered by the system, and so I'm just making sure that it's working as it should, and I'm bringing my context, my knowledge into the system in those checks versus doing the work itself. So what that means is, when I think of skills, that's where I think, it's less about having someone who's maybe really super good at Excel and knowing how to do Excel checks or data manipulation, because all of that can be handled by a system. A little bit more around, hey, I know enough to say I should dig deeper into this output or I should not, because I know payroll.
Yeah, makes sense. And it's fairly easy to transition, you would think. Like if somebody knows Excel and can handle that and get a good grasp of that, you would think that they can also do that on the AI side as well, and make themselves super valuable using the tool.
Yes, I absolutely would expect that, because you would have to know as a user, you'd have to have that knowledge to say, while I'm doing my checks in Excel, I know why something's right or why something's wrong, right? Why this data is incorrect. That can all be translated. That's that subject matter expertise that they're bringing to the system.
And do you think, or how do you think that payroll leaders should be thinking about AI? Is it a tool? Is it a system? Or is it a collaborator?
A collaborator. It is definitely a collaborator. We think about it a little bit as a coworker. Again, not a replacement, a coworker. It can take on some of this routine work. I keep saying that, but that non-specialized routine work as a coworker for the payroll team.
And you need the team to bring the context. This is how things work at our organization, and this is issues that we've seen in pay runs gone, months gone by, that kind of thing. Like they can really bring that data to life.
Right. Absolutely. That context, that nuance, that view into payroll. And again, then you also elevate it. I'm bringing in trends then that I can now share within my organization to help inform business decisions.
Less involved in the doing, more involved in the strategic. We hear it all the time, right? But if you're less involved in the doing, you have more time to think strategically. Start thinking more like a board level employee, or what can we bring to the board that will make them happy. But
absolutely.
We hear a lot of discussion around human in the loop. What does that mean in a payroll context?
Yes, that really hits on the coworker, right? AI is the coworker that can manage those routine tasks, your data, your checking output, to highlight what needs to really have a point of view on, is this output correct or not, right? It can flag those differences. And flag material or meaningful differences. The human in the loop side is really being able to say, yeah, this makes sense, and this is correct, or no, I need to make changes here. I mean, if you think about it, we're all usually doing that anyway when we're using, Gemini, ChatGPT, Copilot on our own, where you're asking a question and then you're kind of saying, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? Does this output, it doesn't meet my expectations. And that's really where we see that human in the loop is still needed, and that expertise is still needed, where I don't see AI, again, as a black box that's just running everything. You need that expertise. You need that sense check.
So should we move on then to the employee experience and how that works with payroll? So how is payroll what is payroll's role in shaping the employee experience?
It's a great question, and it's actually something that also came out heavily in our potential of payroll survey, where organizations are continuing to focus on building out a lot more on the employee experience side in a couple of different ways. So the majority of organizations are saying they're investing more in employee experience with payroll, which I think makes a lot of sense. As I mentioned earlier, every single employee in an organization is touched by payroll. I mean, it's
Every
probably
month.
one of the biggest touch points you have with your employer, right? It's getting paid. And so similar to that shift in strategy in the strategic role of payroll, I think that's where organizations are seeing that real opportunity in that employee experience because of the payroll touch point. So, and it's also very, very personal, by the way, being paid and paid for what you're doing. Obviously, that's very, very personal. And so, what these organizations are really doing is looking at how can we provide more transparency? How can we increase trust in the payroll process? How can we make sure that that connection is happening between the payroll team and employees for, again, what can be very personal? If your pay's wrong, or you're not getting paid on time, or you're a new joiner to a company and they miss your first paycheck. I mean, you can imagine what that does to the employee experience. So
Yeah.
so they really want to make sure that that's visible, that there's a connection there, that employees have the tools they need and the way they want to work to understand their pay, to be able to ultimately have trust, and which drives more engagement within the organization.
There's a stat on it, I think, which is like it is roughly 20% of employees will consider leaving or looking for a new job if their pay is wrong once. If it's wrong twice, that jumps up to half.
Yeah,
Like 50
absolutely.
percent of your employees looking to leave and go somewhere else if their pay is wrong. It
Yeah,
really
yeah,
it's why we go to work, isn't it? So it's like,
yeah, absolutely. And for many of us, it feels like a reflection of, I'm getting paid for what I'm inputting. And so if that's messed up, that really hurts us individually. Absolutely.
so I think we've covered this question, but why has improving employee experience become such a priority for payroll leaders?
Yeah, it really does go back to well, visibility and trust, but there is something in addition that actually links to one of our earlier parts of the conversation, which is also around that productivity side. So one of the other things that I continually hear is that one area where payroll teams spend a lot of time is answering employee questions. So again, linked to the questions about my payroll, was I paid the right way? Is my payroll accurate? Again, and that's very personal. So those questions can come into the payroll team. So there is also something here in being able to, in investing in the employee experience, that done the right way can provide that visibility, can build that trust, but can do so in a way that actually enables opening up some time from the payroll team. Maybe taking on some of those questions around why is my pay changed, that can actually be, again, more automated. So I'll give an example. I was speaking not long ago with a large organization that was saying, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, but they were saying every January 1st, there is a flood of questions coming into the payroll team because everyone's pay has changed, because it's a new year. They may be resetting on some taxes. They may be at a different tax withholding rate. Their benefit withholding has changed. So everybody has a change in pay, and therefore they're all coming into the payroll team. Well, those are the kinds of things that, again, a smart system can actually proactively share to an employee. So it builds some trust because they're proactively reaching out to the employee, but the system can answer those kinds of questions so that the payroll team is not answering those routine things. It's a new year, your benefits withholding has changed.
Cool. So that feeds into like employee self-service then. So we see organizations investing heavily into employee self-service. So what does good look like, and where does the AI add the value there?
Yes. Employee self-service, I think, is absolutely critical because it also goes to the point that the employees also want that information when they want that information or when they need that information. Again, generationally, you also have employees who, maybe they're not in an office. They do everything by mobile phones. They want to text. They don't want to pick up a phone. I know people like that who are like, I would rather do anything than call someone. So having employee self-service with tools where they can ask those questions at the time that they want to ask that, need to ask that, in the day, or get insights into what's in my pay, or I can take actions like change my withholding, or even understand options like, hey, if I'm going on a leave of absence, what does this look like for my pay? All of that, I think, is really important on the self-service side because it allows the employee to get what they need at the time they need and the way they need it, and feel more in control. And again, that builds that trust, that visibility.
And that's what's expected now, isn't it? Outside of payroll, just in the world that we live, you want everything now. You expect everything
Right.
now. You order something online, you expect it to be delivered by 10 p.m. that day. It's like now, 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 now. And obviously
Right.
your pay is one of the most important things. So
Right.
it
And you
makes
want the,
sense that it makes sense that
yeah,
it's happening with this too.
exactly. And you want that visibility that it's on its way, right? And I know it's left the warehouse. I know what happens next.
Yeah.
Because then you have the trust it's going to show up. So absolutely right. That's what I expect when I'm coming into work and how I get paid as well.
Excellent. So this question, I think, answers itself, but I'm hoping you can give a bit more context around it. But are we moving towards a more productive, personalized payroll function? And what does that look like in practice for employees? I think the key bit there is the personalization, because you'd think if technology and AI is more involved, it will become less personalized. But I guess what does that look like in practice?
Yes, I think it can be more personalized. And again, this is where AI maybe makes that possible in a way that maybe earlier automations weren't. It couldn't because of the intelligence behind it. So to me, that looks like being more proactive, right? That looks to me like making it easier in the experience to actually kind of connect to what I need versus as an employee versus having to um, go through a bunch of systems. Am I in the right system, whether it's HR, whether it's payroll, to kind of get what I need? So what I mean by that, being more proactive, we've talked about things like being able to say, hey, it's January, your pay may change. But even things like helping them out with um, proactively notifying things like, hey, according to our company policies, you have some vacation days that you should use so that you don't end up losing out on these vacation days. Let me help you plan that. Let me help you, maximize that. Plan your days around a bank holiday, so you have the option to have a longer weekend and a bigger break. Those kinds of things. That's where the intelligence comes in. That I think can be much more personalized. It can proactively kind of help the employee navigate their system and get the answers that are most important to them, plan their experience that's most important to them, and really, kind of make it feel more like it's a tool for them.
Excellent. So how do organizations ensure that AI enhances rather than replaces the human element in payroll? Because I think that's something that we hear a lot of worry about. My job is being replaced by AI, but how do we make sure that it enhances what people are doing and their role and their skills for the future instead of replacing?
It's a great question, and I hear that question come up a lot as well. And so it's funny, actually, my answer is a non-tech answer. So I think the tech is well on its way, right? In building AI, and as I said, really embedding that intelligence within the payroll technology that payroll teams are using. The way an organization I think can really help them is in a couple of ways. One is being very open about it and very, enabling the payroll teams to understand, what tools are coming and why, and how the organization, wants them to use it. They need to be clear on the benefits. We've talked a lot about how AI can take on, some of that work that's not really a lot of specialized work or value added work to open up time for more value added things. I think having those kind of conversations with payroll teams around how it enables opening up time for other work is pretty important. Other work, sometimes that can sound like, okay, I'm just going to be working all the time, but being able to shift from stuff that is maybe not as exciting when it comes to thinking, thought provoking in your work, being able to take that work on with the system, that routine work, to be able to do things like look for analytics, look for patterns, look for trends. I think that's an important thing. And having a conversation around that, I think, is pretty important. But one of the most important things that they can do is also do some upskilling. So, work with the payroll team, talk about where they expect maybe some of the interactions with systems will change, and the skills that are needed, and then invest in the team to make sure they're ready for that shift with the right skills. And I think this is actually really good for payroll because, you know, they may not always get all of the talent development that, you know, maybe other functions might get when it comes to investing in new skills for a payroll team, because payroll has been payroll for so long. And
Yeah.
so having now, you know, a shift with the technology changing, and what I think is pretty exciting with introductions of capabilities that can really shift how payroll runs, it's a great opportunity for some investment in talent development as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just from my side, I think having a conversation with like from leadership perspective, having a conversation with your team. What I hear from payroll professionals is that they're always drafted in way too late. Like we're running through this
Yes.
project, and you didn't think to ask payroll. So it's like if if an employee knows that their organization is about to implement a new system or are looking at some investment in AI, it's having a conversation with those people early, also to try and retain them as well, like because it is a concern for those lower mid-level payroll professionals that my role might be replaced, but it's about the education, it's about conversation, and it's about just communicating early to make them feel valued. And actually, your role isn't going to be replaced, it's just going to change, and you're going to be doing more interesting work. For the sake of what a 30 to 60-minute meeting, it could mean the difference between losing an employee or keeping somebody invested.
Yeah, 100%.
So, what risks should leaders be aware of if they start to lean too heavily on automation? And how do you maintain the trust with leadership, your team, and your employees?
Yeah, I think the risks really can come in a couple of forms. And you nailed it by saying that it's in leaning too heavily on the automation. So the risks can come in if they're not putting in enough checks in place to make sure that the output, that any automation is driving to the right outcome, right? You don't want to start introducing errors. You don't want to start introducing compliance issues because you're relying too much on automation without putting in the right checks along the way. I think that's one of the biggest risks. I think another risk is what we just talked about from the talent side, right? There's a real risk um, in the talent and losing talent if you're also not investing in the talent development along with the automation, bringing them along on the journey. I think that's a real risk. You don't want folks who are saying, hey, my job's changed, and they haven't been invested enough or been part of it enough to see that as a good thing. They don't see the options for them, so they make the decision to go somewhere else. You don't
Yeah,
want to lose your team.
yeah, absolutely. We see it a lot at the moment as well. It's almost that if you can't beat them, join them sort of thing. So like a lot of payroll professionals will go, right, this tech company is doing AI within payroll. I'm going to go and work with them and see what I can do with those guys. But if you're invested in by your leadership early, I think that cancels out a lot of that risk.
Yeah. And that's actually an interesting point too, because I think there are employees that can fall in a couple of camps. There may be those that are laggards, right? I'm worried. I'm concerned about what changes in my job. And so as a leader, you want to bring them along on the journey. And they've got a lot of great subject matter expertise that can help make sure you've got your right processes around how you're using automation and payroll. And you're absolutely right. On the flip side, you may have folks who are like, I'm using AI all the time in my personal life. How come I can't do things at work? This is so hard, and I'm going to leave to go to an organization that's much more advanced. So you don't want to delay your journey because you have a risk there too. It's a really good
Yeah,
point.
absolutely. So looking ahead then, what will define a high performing payroll team in this AI enabled world? And what's one piece of advice that you'd give to leaders starting this journey?
It's wow. There's so much to dig into in this one.
We could take more than one piece of advice. You can give as
Exactly.
many pieces as you'd
Okay.
like.
Phew. Thank you. Thank you. As I think of a high performing team, I there's a few things that come to mind for me. One is that talent mix. I think it's, as I think of using AI, I kind of shift from kind of processes to what's the work to be done, the jobs to be done. Where can you use your AI coworker? Where do you need that expertise? I think a real high performing team can have kind of that mix of talent or skills, maybe even within the talent, a mix of skills. So that data knowledge, being a bit of that analytics insight, a bit of tech. I'd mentioned the tech side. I think there's a real opportunity for payroll to get a little bit more involved in technology, and a high performing team has that within their just their skills, I guess I would say, within the team. So the mix of what you can look like as a high performing team and the skills that you've got on the team is different than maybe, again, 10 years ago. And so I think that's a big part of it. I think being able to define some strong guardrails, what's important to automate, where do we have the human in the loop, where am I using this as my coworker, and how am I orchestrating it? I think having that definition is very important. And then the biggest thing that I'd say in that high performing team is, and how are you using your time beyond delivering that on-time, compliant, accurate payroll? Back to the strategic organization, where are you bringing in these insights into other parts of the organization? How are you helping being able to, find savings? This is the example you said, or help shape a workforce strategy, or supporting your company with things like pay transparency. That I think is really a big tell in that high performing organization.
Yeah.
So
I think the
my
skills
advice.
mix.
Yeah, you go ahead, and then we'll go back to the advice.
Let me touch on that skills mix. I thought that was great. Like what you mentioned is having a mix of skills. It's not like you're not going to have 10 payroll administrators anymore. It's not needed. And I think you can almost consider your team like a sports team, right? Like you have all different shapes and sizes on a sports team. Everybody has a different role, different speciality, and I think it's resonates with me, the skills mix now needed within a payroll team as well, like liking it to your sports team and just thinking of it that way.
That's a great analogy. You're right. People are playing different positions to get to this outcome, but you've got different positions, different skills you're bringing to it. Great analogy.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Advice, please.
Yes. So the advice I'd say is start. I mean, if you haven't started anything yet, then do. Talk to your payroll providers. If you're not using payroll providers, maybe start to talk to some that are in the space. Talk to analysts in the space. Like you have to do something. And I think that's the biggest thing. Is I mentioned a year ago, not as many payroll teams were, they were kind of saying it's not yet in payroll. Now they're looking a little bit more like, what should I expect in payroll? But you've got to start somewhere on your journey, and that time's now. So that would be the biggest thing. The second piece of advice is actually goes back to your point on what does a high performing team look like. I think you've also got to develop that vision of what you want it to be, so that you can decide, what do I want my team to do? What should our work look like when we have more time that we can work on more interesting strategic activities? What do I want our outcome to be? You want that vision in mind too, so that you know what you're building towards.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it's with everything, isn't it? It's like, just get started.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to have your people around you, haven't you? And it's that entourage thing again. It's like, if you're not an expert in it, go and seek advice. You can do it through providers, governing bodies, analysts. Online, there's so much information online now about AI in payroll, and just having conversations, getting started. I think has to be the first point, right?
Well, and even ask your own team, because again, your folks may be using AI outside of their work life and have great ideas to be able to bring in. And so it's a great starting point as well.
Absolutely. Do you have any last additions before we wrap up here?
No, it's been a fantastic conversation. Fascinating. I mean, you can tell I'm excited about what's happening. I think the technology landscape today really opens up a lot of opportunities for payroll, and enabling payroll to transform, to be more flexible for their organizations, to be able to really again, drive more strategic value, which is a pretty exciting place to be. I think
100%.
it's an exciting time. And so it's been great to be able to talk about it and just kind of share what I see happening overall. So thank you for that.
There's so much that payroll teams can offer, and I think like we're getting to a point now where what we see is a lot of people moving away from the fear element of AI and getting into the opportunity piece. And opportunity leads into the excitement. So thank you very much, Tonya, for your time. There's a lot for organizations to take away there. And we'll see you on the next session.
Great. Thank you so much.